Welcome to the Limitless Potential podcast, where together we will dive into the personal, business, and career-rich tips, techniques, stories, and experiences of some incredibly successful and inspirational people, each with their own perspectives and journeys, and each with golden nuggets of wisdom which might just change your life. I'm Tracy Stone, and I'm a master trainer in a number of career supercharging techniques, a transformational coach, international best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and a woman discovering and evolving my very own limitless potential day by day.
Determined. I went to yoga and one thing
You're going to stand up at your stage.
Celebrate yourself.
Spiritual things are very second I met her.
And so once a week, each of you take
Now I got that message and I see this happening many times again, which is again I see it in a positive way.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Limitless Potential podcast. I'm delighted to welcome Raisie Frankum from The Human Approach, who joins us today from Reading in the UK, not far up the road from where I am. Focusing on the human side of change, working with the EQ, which is the emotional component of us, rather than the IQ, which is the more intellectual, brain-focused component for successful change, Raisie helps her clients to master their mindset for success in life and business. As a behaviour change and emotional resilience specialist, Raisie is a successful and highly respected mindset coach. Her approach to mindset in the workplace comes from over 15 years of coaching and working with behaviour, emotional intelligence, change work, and the underlying subconscious program that we use 95% of the time. Raisie has worked globally with professional athletes, leadership, and individuals in British cycling, Pepsico, Latham and Watkins, Royal Holloway University, Vodaphone, Virgin Media, Finastra, Accenture, and a whole host more of well-recognized organizations. Raisie's successful no-nonsense approach and ability to simplify the complex is the secret to her success. Welcome, Raisie, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
Great to have you here. Now, Raisie and I know each other for a number of years now, and we've both been on our journeys going sometimes in a similar direction, sometimes in different directions. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to regroup here and for the listeners to be able to learn a little bit of what makes you so special and what has helped you to lift yourself up sometimes in life using your own skills. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with people, Raisie. I know you've had a very colourful journey. So,
Yes, it has been.
sometimes we feel we could do with a little less colour, but we handle it anyway.
Absolutely. Right, that's why we are where we are. That's why we do what we do.
So, but Raisie, let's go back and start way back at the beginning, if you would. If you want to tell us a little bit about life before now, tell us about childhood and growing up and what the young Raisie was all about.
So, interestingly, I grew up in France. My formative years and cognitive years were in a sort of rural part of France. Did my early schooling out there. Lived by the sea, was very much in the countryside in a little village. So it's quite interesting that, that those were the years that kind of set me up to know what's available, to, I suppose, compared to then coming back at 9, moving into a council estate, not being by the sea, living with grandparents. And at the age of 9 already, I started to experience polarity of, how rich life could be, and then, moving more into sort of a lack and poverty experience, I guess. So my very early years were very, very nice, very free. We would do a lot of wild camping. I literally grew up on the beach. So that's kind of how my life started. And then at the age of 9, I moved back to the UK, and we had to move in with my grandparents. And again, it was just a concrete town, and into a council estate. And I think my school of life began at that point.
That must have been quite difficult moving back from France to the UK. You were so happy in your life in France, a very natural life. And I know that you are a very natural person, that you love being outdoors, you love sport and energy and all of those incredible things. So it must have been hard for you to move elsewhere. How did you handle that as a young child? What was it like for you making that change?
But it's really interesting, Tracy, because I think this is what's led me to where I am today. I didn't realize what was happening. I just didn't have a clue that, actually my life had changed. I didn't have the resources. I was really disconnected, and I think I disassociated from quite an early age. And it's only now that, I know how to work with the subconscious. I'm connected with some amazing therapists, and I've been able to kind of do that subconscious work that has allowed me to go, oh my gosh, you poor 9-year-old. So I've almost allowed her to become more resourced now. That's only just happened, even over the last couple of years. But that's also made me understand what this journey is, and what we can do, as therapists, as coaches, as healers, whatever we want to call ourselves. This is how we truly heal, and we have to go back to that inner child and understand what they experienced, and actually how they were misinformed, or that their belief system has been misinformed. And it's about always constantly upgrading, because now I can look back at that 9-year-old with love, with empathy, with compassion. And actually, I do lots of timeline work, and when you go back, you kind of go, you're doing great, you're doing great. It's she didn't have the information at the time, so she just did what she did.
And I think that's so frequent that happens, that when we're growing up, we go through a situation that feels very traumatic, and it probably is. But sometimes when we look back at it later on with adult eyes, we're able to see from a more pragmatic sense, actually, you're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. So how was that journey for you, that realization of putting a different context on your childhood situation? What was that like? Because I think that's something that's common for so many people. They grow up and they carry that belief that says, I'm broken from then, I'm hurt from then, I will always be tainted by this or colored by this.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because you and I actually trained together, didn't we? And in the training, I will never forget having my first regression and actually going back and just seeing where it all started. And I didn't understand it at the time, but it was this grey, fuzzy, and then all of a sudden the words like doom and gloom came to me. And I just cried. I think I cried for a whole day after that. But it was just this realization that actually, I had made my life, my beliefs, the meaning about who I was. It had been pivotal on other people's conditioning, other people's beliefs, life circumstances, the environment. And I think that once you see that, once you detach from it, and you decide who you want to be, where you want to go, once you are empowered to live your own life, you're not a child anymore. Actually, you can move in any direction. So what it does really is it moves us out of that victim mode, because I think we live from child, and then we kind of live in that learnt helplessness. If we've gone into trauma, if we've had a difficult time, there's a learnt helplessness that comes with it. And then all of a sudden we're a victim of our environment, we're a victim of our family, and that shame cycle comes in, the unworthiness comes in, and then it's like, this is me, this is my personality, and it's not at all. So it's about being able to let go of all of that, and actually really like draw a line in this present moment and go, well, who am I today, and how do I show up tomorrow? and then it's constantly catching yourself to go, oh, I'm playing a program right now, or this is mum, this is brother, this is sister. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just kind of going, yeah, that's not who I am. But we also need to get to know who we are. And I don't think people give themselves the time to do that. I think they don't know how to, but I also think we don't give ourselves enough time. And it is time, we're talking years. Yeah, this isn't a thing where you sit down and write a journal for a week and kind of go, right, okay, I'm done. It's almost like it's an evolution, isn't it? You kind of go there. I mean, I've been writing gratitudes for must be nearly 4 years now, and I've kept all my journals, and I look at the evolution and I look at everything that I write down, and it just constantly goes. So then you realize you're not trying to get to anywhere, you're just making meaning in that moment, shifting meaning, shifting, and that's just the way that I understand it.
So how would you say your understanding of who you are has changed? You've talked a little bit in there about that you're not who you thought you were. You're not that, you're something else now. How would you say for you personally, your understanding of you has changed from that child into now? What are the core changes?
It's a good question. I think without life events, we don't get taken to that change. I think that if we don't need to change, we don't. Again, I'll go back to that learned helplessness. I do actually see a lot of clients that can't seem to get themselves out of it. They are so stuck in their story that even when you give them the information, they're not ready to receive it. They're not ready to take action. They just can't see beyond what they have. They believe it's going to be that way. So I think there has to be a belief that you can change. There has to be enough information for you to kind of go, oh, actually, that's happened to that person. This person's done this. And then we kind of get into that energy and momentum of like, oh, okay, well, if they can do it, so can I. So that's a belief already, isn't it? But then I think that we're pushed in life. We make decisions, adversity happens to us. And I think it makes us move. So I think I'm going to call it an awakening, Tracy. I don't really know what else to call it. I think it's just you kind of all of a sudden go, something's not right, something's not working. And I think for me, it hit me in my 30s. I'm not sure if I'd had 2 or 3 of my children, I'm not sure. It's all a blur now. But ultimately, like my daughter had an accident, so she got run over. And she was really badly injured. There was a long recovery time, and there was just one thing after another. And I think it just affected me so much that I just wasn't functioning anymore. And also the trauma of the accident had lived with me for probably over a year. So every time I heard a child scream, I would feel like I had flu. Or even if I had laughter, it would trigger me to think that there was something happening, and I'd get flashbacks of my daughter, where she'd been quite severely sort of, I suppose, hurt, but also it was quite physical as well. So I would have images of that. So I ended up seeing a therapist for it. And actually, I did some EDMR, which was the beginning, or was it EDMT? Anyway, it's the therapy, when you do your eyes from side to side. Yeah. And doing that within one session, it completely dissolved that whole feeling that when a child screamed, I would go into that sort of flu-like, my skin would get really sore, my energy would just rush out of me. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And at the same time, he'd introduced me to Buddhism. So he introduced me to a Buddhist nun called Pema Chodron. And I just listened. I downloaded loads of it, and he'd sent me a few bits. And I just listened in between folding the washing and hoovering and doing those things as a mum. I just started to listen to something different. And actually, for me, that's where I started to think, oh, there's another way of thinking. There's another way of being. And also that whole therapeutic side that, I'd lived with this trauma of the accident. And then all of a sudden, I didn't have to live with that. So I think that got a few things going for me. And then really, that's why I do what I do now, because it's like we don't have to live with the trauma. We really don't.
And that's something that an awful lot of people certainly struggle with, though, that realizing that they don't have to live with the trauma. It's a huge breaking point in the process of life
Yeah.
to get to the point where you realize you don't have to have that. So can you talk a little bit more about that point of realization and how for you specifically, I know you've touched on it there, but how do you get to that point of knowing I don't have to feel like that anymore? I don't have to be like that. I don't have to be affected by that.
Mm. So it's interesting because actually trauma comes in many, many forms.
Mm.
And I think my real first experience of understanding trauma was this physical impact, or I suppose it's an accident, isn't it? So something happened. What I realized afterwards is that actually, for whatever reason, because I haven't actually had a traumatic childhood, I'm just really sensitive. I think I've just perceived a lot of trauma, and that's been something about me getting to know me. But understanding that, from a young child, we can perceive trauma, and that could be mental abuse, that could be neglect, it could be all sorts of things. So that's really where my journey has really kicked off, because what I didn't realize is that I was showing up in my relationship with my children, with my husband, to my family, and actually I was projecting somebody that I knew deep down I wasn't. I didn't want to be this person. So I would just kind of have these moments, and you would just, well, I would just flip, or I would lose my patience within a moment. And I noticed it more and more with my children. And I remember when I went to see the therapist, I just thought, if I don't sort myself out now, I'm going to lose my kids, I'm going to lose my husband. And, and I think, again, that's where my journey of understanding I was living my childhood trauma through my relationships. I mean, it is that mirror, isn't it? Everything that I believed I was as a child, I was reliving through my adult life. And again, I mean, I'm way beyond it now, but I think there's always that work to do. So yeah, it's just understanding that things happen to us. Our subconscious locks onto it. It protects us. It might be abandonment. So again, in my case, what I've understood is my mum left when I was 16, and I just felt this deep, deep sense of abandonment, but actually then in life, if somebody rejects you, you go into defense mode, or you might go into attack mode. So there's all sorts of behavioral sort of sides of us that come out, that in our core, at our heart, we're all loving people. I would say 99.9% of us are, loving. We just get triggered, and we're just playing out that protective mechanism. And again, that's kind of what I want to help people with, really.
That's brilliant. And you touched on something quite vital, in a lot of things vital, of course, but something in particular that has struck me and that I've seen so many times as well is when people are putting on a pretense, when they're being something that they're not, trying to please everybody else. We all have to put on some kind of a mask at work, some kind of a mask when we're out socially. That's all normal. You're kind of hugely yourself, but a little bit you're being right for the situation. But when you're putting on a mask all the time and trying to be something that people want you to be that is not true to you, it's very draining, it's very exhausting. And you mentioned that breaking point, that you would start maybe snapping at times. And I think that's always a strong sign, isn't it, that we're not living true to ourselves, because you're keeping up this pretense, and then just suddenly there's a straw that breaks the camel's back, and we do start to then snap, and that's when we start to damage the relationships.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to be too many things, and we're frustrated that people don't seem to see it, they don't seem to understand. But it's just that little moment of break, isn't it?
And I think also to sort of add on to that, when we're wearing the mask, I think we don't realize we're wearing the mask. We know that we're not being authentic, and we're also, I mean, we're so suggested to now, aren't we, with social media? I don't think we just don't know who we are. That's the issue. And we always think we have to be something to feel good, to project in a certain way. And maybe it comes with a bit of maturity. I'm noticing that people are realizing they're a lot younger now. They're waking up a bit more to, oh, like, why am I acting this way? But I think when you're wearing the mask, it's almost like multi-personality disorder, isn't it? We are multiple personalities and we don't really know how to regulate them. We don't know when to bring out those characters. And there is, I'm just reading it at the moment, there's a book, is it ISF, Integrated, or IFS, Integrated Family System? I don't know. I'll give you the link and you can put it into the podcast.
Will do.
It's all the different parts of us. It's parts therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are so many different parts of us. And again, I feel really lucky that I've done so much subconscious work, but I've been able to go to all those different parts. And it wasn't so long ago, I did a session and it was a little bit like role, function, purpose, but different. I didn't have to go into hypnosis, and it was just trying to look at the role of something. And for me, fear popped up. And so I sat with fear and I started to get to know fear as a personality, as a part of me, without judgment. And actually, this is quite funny. It was funny for me anyway, because I think I've lived in fear for a long time. Fear was really pissed off with me because it was like, I'm trying to help you. I'm doing my job, you know, and all I was doing was just kind of batting fear away, going, just go away, leave me alone, you know. But actually fear is doing its job. And it was like a sulky teenager going, oh, like, I'm just helping you. And in that moment, I make friends with fear. Like, she's my buddy now. And when she pops up, it's like, yeah, I know you're doing your job. And we'll have a little dialogue, you know, quietly, obviously. But it's changed everything. It's all about the relationship with yourself. And we have to understand there are many parts of us. So actually receive every single part, know it's trying to do its role. And actually, if it is hindering you from moving forward, because those are the subconscious blocks, then we've got to understand how to give it another job, how to give it another role, or, you know, how to appease it and to let it know it's safe, like, you've got it from here, you know. So it's just taking on a new relationship with self.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Love that so much. And I think that's going to be helpful to so many people, because we do all feel that exhaustion when we're putting on that different persona.
Yeah.
And we don't quite know how to balance all of it then.
Yeah. And I think, you know, again, we're conditioned to believe, so if I think about all the different roles I've had, mother, I was 25 when I had my children, and you know, you just fall into motherhood. And for me, I've had 3 children, and then you think, okay, so I have to be a really good mum, and then I have to be a really good wife, and I must support my husband in what he does. And now in my family, they've all had 3 children, so I've had 3 children, and in my family, the women stay at home, so I stayed at home and, you know, supported my husband to go out. But actually, that probably wasn't that's not what I needed. That's not who I am. You know, evolution changes, our roles are changing. And actually the 1950s model doesn't work anymore, but we don't feel empowered enough, or we feel conditioned to kind of go, oh, but I must do this. And I would just like to put a little like proviso in here. I actually wouldn't change having been at home with my children though. And I think that's the thing. We can kind of say, oh, you know, I'd have done this, I'd have done that. And of course, when we look back, in hindsight, we do all sorts of things differently. But actually, I wouldn't have changed that, because I do think it's been important. And actually, what I've realized looking back is I studied, I learnt my business, and I've had a great journey. So also part of our journey is accepting every decision we've made. And then if it's still not working for us, now let's make a change. There's no point going back and regretting. There's just no point in it. It's just take the good, and actually now, who do I need to be if I want to make change? So that's just something that I've found.
I love that as well. And to live a life of regret is to really waste your life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can't change the past, but what you can change is the interpretation of it, the meaning or the lesson that you take away from it. But continuously beating yourself up and dwelling on it and saying, I should have done it differently, I'm terrible, I'm useless, why did I not know? That's never going to change anything. But taking the lesson and saying, I did that, that happened, now I know to do it differently. And that's okay. I'm going to cut myself a break on that.
Yeah, it's taking responsibility, isn't it? It's taking responsibility for your actions. I think a lot of my journey, I blamed a lot of people around me. Oh, it's because of this, it's because of that. And our true healing, our true empowerment, when we really start to move forward, is when we take full responsibility, full accountability. The buck stops here. And I think that's when we really start to move forward, because I suppose you have to come to a point where we don't mind failing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, if I mess up, then it's on me, but at least it's on me. And and I do believe that's when we start to move forward. But when, again, we live in fear, which I've done again for a long time, it's because you're trying to please people, you're trying to live to other people's models. And what you realize is you just have to live for you. I mean, obviously be aware of the impact it's going to have on other people. But I think, when we say follow your passion, follow your dream, follow your heart, I mean, I don't fully agree with it. I think we are a little bit too whimsical sometimes, and we haven't got enough of a footing in reality in the steps that it takes to get there. But that's people's journeys as well. But equally, I think it's don't live to somebody else's expectation.
Oh my
Does
God.
that make sense?
This is juicy, lovely stuff. And that fear, feeling that fear of failure, it's such a recurring theme for so many people. I've certainly experienced it hugely in my life as well. I think most people do. But that fear of failure is pretty much a lie most of the time, because it's not a lie that we can fail to do things, or to do them to the degree that we wanted, or to get an outcome that we wanted. We may not succeed at that, but when we fear failure, when we're so worried about it, generally we're more worried that the implications are much more dramatic than they actually are.
Yeah.
And that's the lie about the fear of failure, the worry of failure, that the implications are rarely as detrimental as we believe they will be. The sky doesn't fall, the world doesn't end.
Mm.
Sometimes people go in and out of our life because of it. Sometimes jobs go in and out of our life because of it. Sometimes we have a little bit of difficulty to overcome because of it. But the world doesn't end because of it.
Yeah. And actually, I always look at it. I mean, I look at life as a bit of a computer game anyway. Like, we just go on to different levels, and I call it leveling up. You finish one level, and then you've got other things to go and learn and do. And it's just kind of, you know, if you're going through, like I say, we have many lives in one lifetime, really. If we're going through a level and we come up against the same thing again and again and again, you're just going to go back to the beginning of that level and live it out. So I think the more honest we become, the more awake we can become, the more we observe what we're going through and how much a pattern is showing up, it helps us to level up more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's almost like you could spend 10 years on one level, because you're just not listening or seeing or noticing, what's happening. It's almost like going into that wall, isn't it? Constantly going, same thing again, same thing again. And interestingly, because I do a lot of work with people in business. So, of course, we talk about their subconscious processes, but it's like, why is your business not where you want it to be? It's like, why is it that you can't get to where you want to get to? And sometimes we just kid ourselves. We're telling ourselves a lie. We're going, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. But actually, we just need to be really honest. So a lot of the time, that just sort of digress a bit with the business, but people will be running a hobby. And it's like, no, you're not running a business, you're running a hobby. And this is just your interest. And I've been there, which is why now, I'm able to reflect on it. but to kind of go, are you in business? Because if you're in business to make profit, unless you're a non-profit. And if you're not in business to make profit, then it's a hobby and you need to go and find a job, or you need to make profit. And it's having those really like honest conversations and then saying, okay, how are you going to make profit? What are you going to go and do? And then the business strategy comes in, because there's different levels, aren't there, to making it in business. And we talked about that before we started today. It's like, there are certain realities to make your business successful, to have visibility. There is a marketing process, there's a sales process, there's a delivery process, and all of those things have to be put in place. So you can be authentic in yourself, you can get to know yourself, and then you want to be like, yeah, I can go and do my business. And then you've got to understand where you're trying to get to in your business, and are you really putting all those strategies in place. So yeah, I mean, I obviously it's my work, so it can get quite intricate, but it can be quite complex, which is why I like to simplify it. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I think we need some honesty. We just need to sit honestly and just say, why am I not where I want to be? And then keep showing up every day, making that change, catching yourself.
I think that honesty is so vital, and we all like to think of ourselves as inherently honest, and we are generally. But when it's something that we're worried about, we're fearful of, we then tend to start sometimes telling little fibs to ourselves. Because we're afraid of it. So, for example, the people that say, and I've met so many of those people as well, that will say about their business, "Oh no, I'm not doing this to make a lot of money."
Yeah.
So, is this your business, or is it not your business? But it's actually the fear talking, isn't it? And that's when you start lying to yourself, because you're so worried about, can I succeed at this? Am I going to fall over? Am I going to fail? Am I going to embarrass myself, humiliate myself if I say to people, I am doing this and I am amazing at it and this is going to be incredible, it's going to be successful, and then it's not. So when we then take it down by saying, but I don't expect to make money at it, I'm just doing it to help, or I'm just doing it as a sideline, we're already doubting it and doubting ourselves. And how can we make it successful if we're lying to ourselves about what we really want from it?
Yeah.
So when you've worked with businesses like this, could you share with us kind of some of the common themes that come up for people and how you help them in business to overcome those common themes?
But it depends again where they're trying to get to. If we're looking at somebody with a career, so they might be in leadership, so they've got somebody above them, and then they've got to manage up and they've got to manage down. And a lot of that is more about self-regulation. It's about understanding their roles and responsibilities, how they're projecting, how they're running their department, the whole of the business. When you have the higher strategy, the higher views, how that then gets delivered down, to your staff. So it's really giving that person an understanding of what their role is, how they're showing up, what type of leader are they, all those types of things, so that they can actually stand really strong in their career path, in how they're doing their job. So that's sort of within a business. And then obviously there's all the dynamics of teams and different types of leadership as well. It's acceptance that nobody is you. So you're going to be a type of leader, but your manager and your CEO, or whatever the culture is within your business, it's not going to be who you are. So actually it's about understanding, how do I manage that? How can I not take this stuff personally? How do I not go home and just completely crash at the end of the day, or get overwhelmed with the amount of work? Or, so it's all self-regulation, which is where the emotional intelligence comes in. Because you can have as many strategies as you like, but actually you have to have the emotional resilience to be able to apply those strategies. And really, that's the work that I do with people. It's just really helping them to understand who they are, how they're leading. Because again, what I've noticed over time, and I noticed it teaching in schools, funny enough, I did like resilience and meditation program in school. So I was helping teachers to understand how the brain works. So ultimately, meet a child, right brain, emotion first, then put left brain in, logical. Also upstairs, downstairs. So, your amygdala gets, you're in threat, the amygdala gets fired off. They're not going to be thinking straight. So as a teacher, how can you go to a child and actually bring them out of threat and help them through the situation? So I did a program in a school with that, and it was amazing. I loved it. And what I learned and realized is that teachers are playing a role. Everyone's just acting. And then actually, when you look in the workplace, somebody, will start off as an admin, or they'll go into sales, and then all of a sudden they're a sales director. They weren't taught to be a sales director. They weren't taught to run it. They've just had promotions, and unless their company have really invested in them. So it's almost sort of helping them to understand, I suppose, who they are, how they've got to where they've got to be, and be able to understand themselves, and I suppose self-regulate to stand in that leadership role. Lead, be a visionary, leading by example, isn't it? So yeah, I think that's generally the way that I work with people. And then I think if we're looking more small business, sorry, trains just going past, really noisy. So if we're looking at small businesses, it's actually what blocks do we have? So it might be, I'm trying to think of, procrastination is a massive one. It's so big, isn't it? Just literally procrastination, phone addiction, social media addiction, especially if you have to be on social media. So actually it's working with that, looking at the addiction that goes in there. Sometimes it's, again, fear of stepping up as a leader. So if you're running a company and you're a people pleaser, it's very hard to tell your staff, this is what I want from you. It's very hard to kind of lay down the objectives, because actually they just kind of want to help that employee, but actually they're not setting strict boundaries. And therefore, then actually there's no foundation, there's no stability, and no one knows where they stand.
That's always a common problem. Sorry, they wanting to be the friend. There's a lot of people that step into management, and when they finally get in to be a manager, that promotion that they've waited for, they think, I am going to be the leader that people love. They are going to do amazing work because they love me, because I'm going to be their best friend. I'm going to be nicer to them than any manager has ever been. And they actually do believe that that's going to be the way that they will get a motivated workforce, but that doesn't work. Doesn't mean you should be the most terrible person, but that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, agreed. And again, it just, I kind of had a bit of a revelation, going through this, because we're always looking out to everybody outside of us, going, oh, this person's this, they've got all this experience, they've done this, they've done that. And then for me, I've seen everybody's a traumatized child. I mean, that's the truth of it, isn't it? Everybody. I mean, even more so, sorry, CEOs and like senior leadership. I think most of them, I have to be probably a little bit careful with what I say, but there's a lot of narcissism. There's a lot of psychopathic behavior, to be honest, where it is just a tunnel vision. Everything is done with a very disassociated sort of view on things, and that just comes from trauma ultimately. And I think if everybody's got a soft side, and I just wonder if we could all just unlock that softness, there would be a much more pro-social way of working, and it would just be kinder, wouldn't it? The cultures, it wouldn't
So
be
true.
about competition, or having to work harder. And it's interesting, I don't know if you've heard of this, Tracy, but because I'm sort of doing quite a bit of research for my new business at the moment. There's a quiet quitting. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That has become very trendy and popular, and it's kind of the new evolution of understanding motivation now. Yeah,
And just saying no, like, this doesn't work for me, or I'm going to put my boundaries in, and that's really what it's all about, isn't it?
yeah.
So I do think, sort of, if we're looking at a force as such. And also with COVID, there's just been so many different changes going on. And again, I'm really curious as to see how we can get the workplace back in, because people want to work. We need connection, but actually we don't need to be a slave to our work. We don't need to be owned by somebody. We need to own ourselves. We need to have our own choices, our own personal life, our family, and not feel pulled in all sorts of different directions. And I'm quite excited to actually look at making change in that area, because I just think we're at that cusp now where we can. You know, COVID has just let so many people know there is another way of working, you know, and some companies are trying to get everybody back into the office again. For some it will work, for some it won't. And actually it's like, well, how could we find that nice balance again? You know, and how could people become more comfortable in the workplace? How could people become more comfortable with working from home? You know, just having that lovely balance. So I think we're going to find out. There's big change ahead. It's exciting.
There is. How has it changed your working life during COVID and coming out of COVID?
I don't I don't think I can put my situation as a normal COVID experience, Tracy, to be honest, because so literally as we walked into lockdown, obviously being a coach, everything just stopped. You know, everybody went into like freeze mode, you know, and within a couple of months of going into lockdown, my husband decided that it was going to be a good idea to leave. So he then obviously he moved into his own place. Then it was trying to get used to not being a family anymore, and it's just carried on, to be honest. So it's actually been really, really challenging. I mean, what's happened for me over the past 2 years, I'm actually still processing now. Well, I'm just starting to process, and that's my adversity. You know, I've been able to grow through it, but I don't. It's not a normal COVID experience for me. And I think I was saying to you before, my house just recently burnt down as well, and you just kind of go, you know, kick me, come on, bring it along. So yeah, I think for me, COVID it's almost hasn't existed. It's so irrelevant to me, because actually my life adversities had come in on such a higher level that it just almost made COVID just a non-entity.
It was irrelevant for you because you had bigger stuff going on.
Yeah, which is really, really important, because I think this is what people need to understand. We will always go, oh, I've lost my job, I haven't got any money, you know, and that's going to be the worst thing that's happened. And then all of a sudden, you might then get a cancer diagnosis, and you go, oh, I don't care about the money now, I've got to get well because I've only got so much to live. And you know, things just they can always get worse. They can progressively get worse. So it's like, at what point are you catching it where you're being in that victim mode of, oh, this is terrible, I'm worrying, I have anxiety, and this, you know, this is so bad that this has happened to me. And actually, is it really that bad? You know, how much worse could it get? Now, we don't want to ask for it to get worse, but I think it's really good to just be grateful. And when adversity hits us and it comes to us, to actually be solution focused. And, you know, just kind of go, well, it could be worse, but I've got all of this. And I think for me, I've learned that through doing my gratitudes. I mean, every single day, I start my day looking at everything that I have. And when I start wobbling, or when I start just becoming a little bit ungrounded, I meditate, you know, I go to my breath, but I'll always look at what I've got. And the other thing, which I found really, really interesting actually through this process. So when my husband initially first left, I just crumbled. I absolutely, because everything that I had been, so I'd been at home with my children for years, as I said, I've supported him, and it was almost like there was no Raisie. Like, who was she? Because she lived for everybody else. And even in my work, you know, personal training, doing nutrition, going into mindset, hypnotherapy, it was always about fixing other people. Ultimately, I needed to fix myself. But I just remember not being able to function. So all I could do was sometimes go and lay on the grass in my garden and breathe. And that's all I could do. And then if I got to the end of the day, I thought I got through a day. And then, you know, you might be able to do something more. So for me, I got a colouring book. So I was pretty non-verbal at the time. I wasn't able to talk very much. I mean, I think I cried for a year. And I just wasn't able to function. And I got one of those mindfulness colouring books. And what I'd noticed, just being really quiet, meditating, and just allowing myself to just be, I would start colouring the little blocks on the mindfulness colouring. And what I noticed is that I could choose what colour I put onto that page. I had the choice to do that. I could pick any pen and I could put it anywhere. And I could make it in a pattern. I could make it just splotches of different colours. And then what I noticed, when I could choose what colour I could use, I started to notice that I created a picture. And then all of a sudden I got these little downloads. It was like, what if I can choose the colour and then I'm creating a picture? This is the canvas of my life, and I can do this with my life. And I just need to do it one colour at a time, one square at a time. And by doing that, I can create my life again. And actually, that is how I've rebuilt my life. And even to the point of sometimes like cooking would be too much, and going shopping would be too much. So I would go to the shops and I would just buy what I needed for the day. So if I managed to do that, that was a win. And then now I'm doing shopping for the week, or I'll go shopping, you know, I'm just doing everything again. And I have a little wobble and I think, no, you're good. Because there was a time where it was really hard to go to the shops. And my sister would come over every Tuesday night and she would cook me dinner. And I would hang on to that Tuesday to have company, to have somebody cook for me, so I'd have a proper meal, that I could sit with my kids and actually know that they've been fed properly. And you know, that's a very humbling experience, really humbling. And actually, if you can hold on to that, you can only progress from there. So I've learned so much through my adversity.
That's amazing. And you talked about being solution focused. So when you think about your personal adversity, I mean, your house burnt down this year. That's huge. Your marriage, that's huge.
Yeah.
So how have you become solution focused? If you think of those huge things going on in your personal life,
yeah,
how have you brought yourself into being solution focused from that feeling of, I can't handle this, this is all too much?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important first to say that I did cry for like a year. I think I cried to you. It's like, you know, there were a lot of people. I had a lot of support. I really found out who my friends were at that time. So I think allow yourself to cry, allow it all to come out, but do something with it. And I think there comes a time where you have to become, you have to have the strategy. And you have to notice your emotions, but not allow them to lead you. And there were certain things along that journey for me where I really got to know my thoughts and my mind, and who was speaking, like who was showing up today, and actually being in charge of that, because that person, that unworthiness, that self-critic was not helpful. So therefore, I had to find another part of me that was going to be helpful. So I think that's the solution focus, if that makes sense. Deciding to manage my brain, deciding who was in charge, deciding where I wanted to go, but also letting go of the outcome. Because sometimes, and I think this has made me a much better therapist and coach, sometimes we just can't future pace. We can't think beyond today. And that teaches you to live in the moment. And that's a real blessing, because actually it's in the moment, as we go through our day, things come to us. We then can work with it. As long as we take action from it, we can then start moving our life forward rather than pushing. or projecting or trying to manifest and create things, have an intention, know where you want to be, put the right vibration out. Everything's a mirror. There's karma. So when shit comes back at you, know that you've put it out there. So stop putting shit out and start doing and being who you'd want to be and how you want to receive it. And it starts today. It starts right now. And there's going to be a little bit of fallout, because there's going to be a bit of karma that comes from our past. Take it, but keep showing up and keep, for me, I went to the beach once and I picked up a stone and I made a promise to myself that I would never speak another bad word about myself. And then it sat on my desk at my computer, and that stone now is on my bedside table. And it's a reminder. And I'll sometimes say something derogatory about myself, or I'll doubt myself. And then I think about my stone and I think, no, because I promised myself that I wouldn't do that. So I'm not going to let myself down. I am going to have my own back. And that is how we progress. No one else can have your back but you. So
oh my God,
promise yourself,
that's glorious. And it's so true, because when we give our power over to other people and expect them to do the heavy lifting, or them to have our back, and people do have our backs.
We have support
to the great degree that they can.
Yeah.
But if we give over all of our own accountability and responsibility to others to do that, then they can take that away at any time, and we're no longer in control of ourselves. So embracing that notion of being accountable for me and responsible for me, and knowing, yeah, maybe this is a very, very, very tough time, but I have to choose something that is going to lift me from that, instead of choosing to stay wallowing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's moving out of the victim mode. However, I think it's really important to understand that going into victim mode is part of our healing. So again, I did have every part of me taken away. What you've just said is absolutely right. I woke up one day and thought, nothing is mine. None of it was mine. The only thing I had really was my children. But even then, I'd been at home with them, but then they started living with my husband, and then I didn't get to see them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like nothing is mine. So then you start going, well, I need to start creating. I need to start owning stuff, because it wasn't my money. It's not really my house. Not really my children. They're their own entities. The job can be taken away in a moment. So it's just, I suppose, again, being humble, but also appreciating that you've got to build things for you, and they've got to belong to you. And that's being in the self. And then no one can take anything away. And I think I said at the beginning, there is very little that will knock me over now. Very little, because I'm myself. I'm me. And gusts of wind, literally, I would be knocked over for days. And now, it could take me half an hour to pull back into a grounded state. It could be 30 seconds, but there's no way I'm going to give a day away. No way. I'm not getting hijacked anymore. I'm not giving my time. And one of my mantras was, do not give another minute away.
Raisie, I love that. And what a perfect note and golden nugget of inspiration and wisdom to finish today on. That is absolutely perfectly put, and so vital, and we can spend a lifetime getting to that point. So that is beautiful. Raisie, thank you for sharing all of that with us. It has been an incredible conversation, and again, I know that people are going to get so much goodness and juiciness out of that. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Tracy. Thank you. I love our chats.
A great pleasure. And it always is just a great chat. So thank you, Raisie. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And we wish you all absolutely limitless potential. And we'll see you again soon.